Good morning, friends. Good morning. Today is a very special day. We have not only guest speaker, we have guest speakers. So we're so fortunate to have 3 speakers from Scarborough Missions. We're so glad that Paul Mckenna, he agreed to this and he was able to bring Father Gallagher and Sister Lucy. They will all present the talk on challenges and difficult challenges and benefits of interfaith dialogue, maybe from different perspectives. There are very distinguished persons who worked for many decades in the interfaith. First talk will be by Paul Mckenna. To introduce you all to Paul Mckenna, his first time coming to the Vedanta Society, and I welcome him very much, and I welcome all of you. Paul Mckenna teaches rights and concerns in the fields of world religions and interfaith dialogue. In his more than 30 years of experience in his field, Paul has received a number of awards and honors for his interfaith work. Paul created the Scarborough Missions Golden Rule poster, this one, featuring the Golden Rule scripturally and symbolically in 13 religions. This multi-faith poster has achieved international renown as an educational and interfaith resource. Now I invite Paul Mckenna to give his talk on challenges and benefits of interfaith dialogue. Please.
Can you put that on? Just for the cameras. Sure. You're fine. Thank you, Swami. I'm grateful to be here, and for many reasons. I've had occasion to study the lives of Swami Vivekananda and Sri Ramakrishna, and I've also had a chance to write about them. Can you hear me? Okay. I want to do a short history of the interfaith movement and then just talk briefly about what I see as some of its values. And as a reference point, I want to use this as a symbol of the stunning new levels of conversation and cooperation we have seen among the world's religions in the last few decades. So this is no longer a Golden Rule poster. This is a symbol called the Interfaith Conversation. And of course, there's more than 13 religions in the world. There are really thousands of religious cultures. There's nothing new about interfaith. It's an ancient phenomenon. Religions have always been touching one another, influencing one another, cross-fertilizing. In fact, when a new religion comes into existence, where does it usually come from? From another religion. Nothing new about interfaith. But there is something new in the last 120 years, at least in the West. And it all begins with the Parliament of Religions in Chicago in 1893, a major gathering, milestone event, and the most memorable figure of that gathering was Swami Vivekananda. 1893 is also a very symbolic date because it marks the period in and around where we see Asian and Oriental immigration to the West. So this is the beginning of East meets West, which is very important in terms of interfaith. But it's not really until the early 1960s that that interfaith really becomes visible in the West. There are some real contributing factors. Broad-based international patterns of immigration, creating an encounter of religions and cultures in the last few decades that we have never seen in the history of this planet. The revolution in communications technology, internet, etc. All of this stuff, plus other factors, is moving this conversation ahead rapidly. 70 years ago, there were only a handful of interfaith organizations on the planet. Now there are thousands. In the United States alone, somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000. 70 years ago, this was inconceivable. Nobody saw it coming. The religions of the world are now cooperating on every conceivable issue. Everything from soup kitchens to spirituality to social justice to academic scholarship. From soup kitchens to spirituality to academic scholarship to social justice, and everything in between. Again, 70 years ago, no one saw this coming, with a few exceptions, of course. So, three differences I see between what's happened, let's say, in the last 120 years and in the more ancient period, interfaith-wise, is that the movement has become truly global. This is not a Western fad. This is a truly global event. And it's happening even in cultures that are not multicultural and multi-faith like ours. In monocultural environments around the world, you will find interfaith consciousness. And that's because of the effect of the internet, the effect of global consciousness, etc. The second difference in the modern period that I see is the sheer volume of interfaith activity we've seen. Today, May 5, all over the world, there are interfaith conferences, interfaith gatherings, etc. And that'll be true tomorrow and Tuesday and every day of the year. Again, this wasn't happening 1,000 years ago. There are an estimated 4 million interfaith websites now. Another big shift is the level of sophistication and organization and intention. If we go back in history, a lot of this interreligious stuff was to some degree casual and accidental with very real effects. Now it's, again, highly sophisticated with internet and organizations, and scholars, and all the rest of it. So, why are we doing this anyway? Why should we do interfaith? Why even bother? What are the benefits, purposes, goals, and motivations for doing interfaith? Well, the short answer is that these are infinite. There's an infinite number of reasons. There are, for example, hundreds of thousands of people now on the planet involved in interfaith or interfaith-related work. And if we were to interview each of them, we'd find that they had more than one reason for being involved in this. So I'm not going to list all those. Rather, what I would like to do is, and again, you could find everything from soup kitchens to spirituality to social justice for, purposes of all that. What I want to do is take a moment to just look briefly through the eyes of one individual who happens to have influenced me more than any other in my interfaith career. It's a little man on the other side of the planet who you know well, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. And I believe he had genius-level insight into the dynamics of the interfaith conversation, and he expressed it all so simply. And the first is that interfaith has to do with the process of purification. The interfaith journey involves a profound process of purification if it is practiced authentically. And I just want to look at that on three levels. Through dialogue, we discover good things in our tradition that we didn't even know we had. Gifts, treasures, potentialities, capacities. Example, in recent decades, Christianity, in dialogue with Buddhism and Hinduism, has rediscovered Christian methods of prayer and meditation that have been lost for 1,500 years. Secondly, we get in touch through authentic interfaith dialogue with things in our tradition that are not okay, things that are destructive or harmful. And through that dialogue, we're left with a decision. Do we leave that stuff the same, or do we get rid of it? Third, we have occasion to discover new things, new gifts. And this can be controversial because many religions have concerns around orthodoxy and purity of teaching, and there's a fear of being corrupted or polluted by this, getting this. And an example would be, we know yoga coming out of the universal or the ancient heritage of India is now becoming universal. I'm a practitioner of yoga, and I regard it as one of the greatest gifts in my life. But we will find, for example, in Christianity and Islam, a real unease with people becoming involved in yoga. At the same time, all over the world there are all kinds of Christians and Muslims involved in yoga, and there will be more. Second element of the Gandhian interfaith take is that from his perspective, humility is the door to this conversation. It's also a way of talking about the goal of this conversation. One of the problems in Christianity is that humility is often understood in a moral or ethical way, or maybe even a guilt way. Whereas in your tradition, I would tend to understand it expressed as a state of consciousness. Humility is a state of consciousness. It's an interior space that we're trying to get to. And we usually can't get there without a painful process of purification. So I would suggest that humility is important because when we achieve it, it gives us access to spiritual gifts. Why is humility important for interfaith? Because it has the capacity to get us into a state of consciousness that opens us to the gifts and the treasures and the goodies that are here in unlimited abundance. Third Gandhian point, and one that is very recognizable to you, the interfaith journey is essentially and fundamentally a journey into nonviolence. Interfaith, the marriage of interfaith and nonviolence. In a world gone crazy with violence, this has to be one of the best pieces of news we've heard on this planet in a few millennia. The interfaith movement is about creating cultures of peace. And if an interfaith organization is not in the business of peace and peacemaking, they're not in the business of interfaith. They're into something else. Final point, from the Gandhian perspective, has to do with the all-important issue of union or unity. I think we all agree that authentic religious experience has the capacity to bring us into some kind of experience of union or unity. What I've learned from Gandhi is that what's true at the level of the individual, what's true at the level of the single faith, can also be true at the level of multi-faith. Accordingly, all authentic interfaith experience has the capacity to bring us into some kind of experience of union or unity. So these are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul Mckenna, for wonderful making clear us the goal and the problems and the benefits of interfaith dialogue. Now the next speaker is Sister Lucy Thorson, NDS. Sister Lucy is a member of the Sisters of Sion, an international Catholic religious order of women who have a particular commitment to dialogue between Christians and Jews. A skilled educator, Sister Lucy has more than 35 years of experience in Jewish-Christian dialogue and on 3 continents, she had spent extended periods in Israel and Rome. Sister Lucy Carson, NPS. Welcome.
Thank you, Swami. And it's really a joy and a privilege for me to be here this morning. And I want to thank all of you for this opportunity. And following upon what Paul has shared with you, I would like to share with you some of my experiences, some of my reflections coming out of my experiences living in the context of Jerusalem. I spent about 18 years living in Jerusalem in the Middle East. I spent some time living in Tunis and Turkey and Egypt. And I would just like to share with you what I consider in the overall area of interfaith relations are 3 positive areas of interfaith relations and growth. Areas where I truly have seen growth taking place on the local level. The 3 are that there's more shared action for a better world. Secondly, as Paul already mentioned, there is much greater interfaith conversation or dialogue that is taking place. And third, there is a greater growing mutual spiritual exploration. So let me talk about these a little bit with some examples. The first area where I have seen growth in interfaith relations is the recognition of shared values that allows us, whether Jews, Christians, Hindus, Muslims, etc., to be able to act together for the common good. Some of the values we share include respect for life, nonviolence, equal rights and partnership between men and women. And it is my experience that we have seen a growth among people of various faith communities who are acting together to alleviate human needs. Let me give you several examples. When I lived in Jerusalem from 1973 to 1991, and particularly during the period of 1975 to 80, I actively worked with a group of Jewish, Muslim, and Christian Arabs to respond to the needs of persons and families who were the victims of the civil war in southern Lebanon. Together, Christians, Jews, and Muslims, we brought them food, clothing, plastic for the windows, and blood plasma. Some of the Lebanese Muslims who were injured in the civil war were brought by Lebanese Christian volunteers to be aided by Jewish doctors in a hospital in Tel Aviv. You couldn't have imagined such an interfaith initiative if you tried. As I mentioned earlier, it was really the values of human dignity and respect for persons that motivated them. It motivated the Muslim, Jews, and Christians to act together for the common good. So in this example, it was my experience that these interfaith actions were also very concretely working for peace in the area of the Middle East. A more recent experience is that of Palestinian, Muslim, and Christians and Israeli Jewish bereaved families, that is, families, all of whom have lost someone from their family in the struggles in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict over the years, whether it was in the 1973 Yom Kippur War, whether it was in the intifadas or uprisings in the 1970s and 80s, whether it was in the Gulf War in 1991. These families now continue to come together, Muslims, Jews, and Christians, to share their stories and to help one another be healed and to be reconciled in the midst of their pain. This, to me, is both a challenge and a sign of growth in interfaith relations. A very local example of diverse religious groups and persons acting together for the common good, and in this case for refugees or new immigrants to Canada and to Toronto, whether they be Christian, Muslim, or whatever religion, is that of a group in Scarborough Missions which is called Becoming Neighbours. And we're fortunate to have with us this morning the co-director of the organization Becoming Neighbours, Noreen Walsh. Would you please stand?
Good morning. Good morning.
And we also have brochures which will be handed out on this interfaith initiative working for refugees and new immigrants in the Scarborough Centre. So the second overall area of interfaith growth that I see is interfaith conversation, as Paul mentioned earlier, or as some call it, theological discussion. When I lived in Jerusalem, I had the opportunity to participate in the Rainbow Group. And again, rainbow, it's a beautiful image, isn't it? And it was a gathering of Jews, Muslims, and Christians who came together to speak about their faith beliefs and to speak about their similarities and their differences. And again, I think this was a challenge and a sign of growth. Likewise, living in Jerusalem, I had the opportunity many times to participate in the services in the Muslim mosque and the Jewish celebration of the Sabbath in the synagogue, and to frequently visit the Baha'i Temple in Haifa. Visiting these holy places and conversing and exchanging with persons of various faith communities made me more aware of how our differences continue to enrich our understanding of God, of the divine. And this transfers, I think, to the local level here. In North America, in Canada, many persons, many students are continuing this interfaith conversation. For example, at Scarborough Mission Centre, there are hundreds of grade 11 high school students who come to the centre to learn about and to exchange with persons of other faith communities. This is part of their world religions course. It's an opportunity for them to be challenged and to grow in interfaith understanding. Also, in Palestine and Israel, there is a group called Interreligious Coordinating Council. And it's interesting because there are over 55 different religious groups who work together for peaceful coexistence. Sometimes we don't hear about these groups. They may not be in the news. But these groups, interfaith groups, are working together on a local level to bring about greater understanding and peace among the peoples in the Middle East. Thirdly, another broad area where I see there is growing awareness or recognition through ongoing dialogue, conversation, and relations is that the deepest meeting point that we have is really in the center or in the cave of our hearts. As we share our spiritual life, as we share our search for the presence of the divine. For some years in Jerusalem, I had the privilege of working with a group which is located near Jerusalem, which is called the Oasis of Peace. Presently, there are 40 families, Arab Palestinian Muslims, Arab Palestinian Christians, and Israeli Jews living together on a daily basis and working together collectively, caring for the land, running a guest house, and in particular acting for a very creative initiative called the School of Peace. I want to speak for a moment about the School of Peace because I think it's a very strong example of the challenges and some of the hopes and some of the growth in interfaith relation. The students from across the country have an opportunity to come together to get to know and to listen carefully and sensitively to someone from the so-called other side, whether it be Palestinian or Israeli, Muslim, Christian, or Israeli Jew. These students are helped to feel comfortable, to honestly express their feelings about the many issues in the ongoing Palestinian-Israeli conflict. And I recall one Muslim student saying, a teenager saying, you know, people are really good. We are all humans, and the key is that we should respect each other if we want to live together. I think that was a very key issue, the need to respect one another in our differences. I also want to point out that the Oasis of Peace, or Nevi Shalom, has a place of prayer. A place of prayer where daily the community, Jews, Muslims, Christians, come together in a moment of silence. Personally, I've had many good moments of being with this community in silence, just being with each other and learning to be silent in the presence of the divine. They cannot pray together because of differences theologically. However, they have agreed to be together in silence, in prayer, as a group. And I think this is a wonderful sign and challenge of interfaith relations. There are many other examples I could share with you, however the time is short. To conclude, for me, an overall growth in interfaith and interreligious relations is the willingness to listen to and to learn from the other. A willingness, as I put it, to pass over into the faith experience of the other person or the other community, and then to pass back, as it were, into our own faith experience, faith community, and to ask ourselves, how has this experience challenged or transformed me? This willingness to listen to and to learn from diverse faith communities is for me indeed a challenge and at the same time a very hopeful sign of interfaith growth today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sister Lucy. So really you saw among the conflict also how people come together, sit together, love together, and they pray together. So that is really the oasis of peace in the desert, as it were. In the conflict there was so much peace. And these are the strength that keep the hold on the world. The more powerful they become, the world becomes better. And with your varied experience for so many years, and it is very wonderful to hear a first-hand experience of really working here, and such a good news that all can come together. A few months back, we had celebrated Music of Faith, where 10 faith groups participated. And when we found that one group, Muslim group, couldn't come because they were busy, otherwise they had said they would come. Last moment we announced, sorry, Muslim group couldn't come because they're busy. Then we were surprised to find one Jew the Jewish person, he come to us and say, can I sing on behalf of the Muslims? And we are so happy to hear this, and he did it with so much reverence, respect, and so wonderfully he sang the name of Allah. It touched the hearts of all of us. This coming together, being united, respecting others, as you said, it's really the need to make us happy. What will make us happy? That we always try for, and that is the love and respect and feeling of unity. Our next speaker is not unknown to us. He is very respected, very popular. He was very well known to Swami Pramathanandaji. He was the first monk in charge of the Vedanta Society of Toronto. Father Gallagher, last time he came and spoke to young students, and they were so happy. Vidya Mandir day, he had come and sat on his steps and he started speaking with them. He's always informal, wonderful. He just holds on to the people. To introduce him again to people, to those who do not know him, Father Terry Gallagher, SFM, is a priest member of Scarborough Missions with a background in the Philippines and more than 20 years of experience in interfaith dialogue, a dynamic speaker and animator. Father Terry has a particular commitment to youth interfaith work and has attended interfaith youth conferences in various parts of the world. I'm glad to welcome Father Terry Gallagher.
This is very much a learning experience as well as a speaking experience. So ever since I got out of the car, I've been listening. First we heard the cardinal singing. So before we came to be with you, in your wonderful Ramakrishna temple and Vedanta Society, the cardinal was already here. And then we walked the last time around the front, ahead of yourselves, just coming in too. And I stood under the tree with the many blossoms, the magnolia tree. And I was sitting there, standing there, and the leaves were falling. And I decided I would take them home. This is just a little one that fell. And many little children are falling around the world, never reaching the stage of being fully grown. And so let us remember the children who are wanting to grow up to be beautiful, beautiful leaves, beautiful parts of the blossom. And then I thought, my God, I'm sorry. I was standing on hundreds of dandelions. And I apologized. I actually said, under the magnolia tree, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. I'm saying this to you, and I heard you exclaiming, what a wonderful, colorful, flowering trees you were seeing as you entered. And I was thinking, Amen, Amen. Oh woman, oh woman. We saw the same thing. And then I wondered, how did you choose this location for your community? Because always when we come here, people say, when we're inviting them to join us and you, it's so difficult to find. Like, why would you put it here? And I was thinking, maybe the magnolia tree was already here. And you came to build your building and to have your community in this beautiful, peaceful, quiet area of a very busy city, just along Black Creek Drive and Eglinton. So it was good to come and just listen and to learn, even before entering. I want you to know that this Scarborough Mission community was founded to work in China to help the little children and the old who were being forgotten or neglected, because at that time in China there was great poverty. That was 1918. But it was because of one of the Ramakrishna Vedanta Society members who worshipped here regularly, named Deo Kernahan, that we Scarboroughs were given credibility among the Sikhs, among the Hindus, among the Buddhists, among the Jains and the Zoroastrian and the Muslim community of Toronto. One of the things that has challenged me and that changed me as a person, as a priest of 46 years, and this is what happens when you begin to move in the interfaith circle. I began to recognize the great harm, the great hurt, the sin of being blind to the work of God, beginning with the indigenous people, to the Zoroastrian peoples, to the Hindu and the Buddhist and the Taoist. For all these peoples and cultures before Christianity thrived and made many gifts, not just in worship, but in work of art and science. So, as a Roman Catholic priest, I've had to learn the history of my people's journey to all the lands and nations, and always beginning by saying, I'm sorry, forgive me, because I have not followed the wisdom teachings of Jesus, who was a Jew, and the wisdom teachings of the prophets that he learned from. And so now I am trying, as a priest in my Roman Catholic community, because of Deo Kernahan, and because of so many Hindu, Buddhist, Muslim, Sikh people I have met and worked with, I am changed and I am changing. But it's very lonely, because not all the Catholic community understand. They still say 20 years working in interfaith dialogue with Hindus and Buddhists. That's wonderful. How many converts have you had? You see, we still have a different mindset. We haven't arrived at the true dialogue, but we're trying. Because from the highest level of our Roman Catholic Church teachings are the offices and the cardinals who say we must enter into dialogue. Because when Vivekananda in 1893, sent by Ramakrishna and Mama to go to America. And I only learned today, stopped first in Vancouver and then in Montreal on his way to Boston, not Chicago, and arrived in Chicago. And then sitting humbly in front of a house, did what he did across India, traveling, always begging for his food. And it was several days sitting in one place before a woman opened the door and came out and welcomed him in. So I, and we here, sisters of Zion, sisters of the Ursuline community, Scarborough Missions, many, we're always on a journey to different places, learning and speaking and telling our people, please journey like this. And I'm saying to you today, don't just be Vedanta Society who study in the monthly newsletter that I also receive. Don't just be studying and students, but please join Dale Kernahan. Please join Vivekananda. And do what you can in your own place, in your own circle, to continue this dialogue. Especially, as Sister Lucy said, in working together in action where there is great need. I want to share this last song with you because I learned it from a Trinidadian who came from a Hindu tradition, like Dale Kernahan. But he has a Muslim name, Ali, Don Ali. And he sings bhajans in Hindu. He sings Muslim Sufi songs, and he sings Christian songs. And I learned from him how this is what we must do, which you're already doing. You're honoring Buddha, Lord Buddha. You're honoring Jesus, Lord Jesus. And you're honoring the great souls of your own tradition. Well, let us sing together each other's songs. Let us learn together. And what happens at the end of this month is another group of Hindus, followers of Sai Baba. They're gathering in the city of Toronto in front of City Hall for the Walk for Values. Another community of Hindu tradition teaching the way. And so, like Don Ali, I say, millions of stars. Millions of stars in the sky. I'm losing it.
To one God.
Millions of stars in the sky giving praise to one God. Millions of men and women lifting their eyes to one God. So many children calling to God by many a different name. One Father, Mother, loving all the same. That's who we are. That's who we Christians are becoming. And all of us are becoming. One family, loving one God, and practicing that every day.